This project is an honest and in-depth perspective of and from former students of Milt and Hershey School. We call ourselves Milts.
An organic, open discussion of life before, during, and after attending MHS.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Milt Talk Podcast. We are here with the lovely Francine Serafin from the class of 93. Welcome, Franny.
Hi.
We were looking forward to having you on. You know, we were just talking about a bunch of different things just now, but before we get into it, can you tell us, we know you graduated in 93, but can you tell us when you came to the Milt and, you know, what student home you were in? And
Sure. So I came in 1993 by way actually of Wayne Alling. I don't know if people know that, but Wayne Alling's mom and my mom had a mutual friend, and Wayne had come to the school, I think in like the 3rd grade. And his mom told my mom about the school, and that's how I ended up coming. But I ended up coming in the 7th grade, so 1987, and then I was there till 93. And I was in Student Home Liberty, and then Maysland, and then they busted up Maysland because we had some problems, some nighttime visitors. And they decided we were a little too tight with each other, and then I ended up at Silverbrook my senior year.
wow, this brings back memories. So wait, Wayne is from Pittsburgh, I believe. Is that right?
Well, no, he's from New Jersey originally.
Oh.
Yeah, he lives in Pittsburgh now, but originally he was from New Jersey. And
So are you originally from New Jersey as
yeah.
well?
Yeah.
Where at in Jersey?
So North Jersey, just outside of New York. It's a really small town called Wallington. It's
Wallington, yeah.
Yeah, really? You know it? No. What?
Everybody's a comedian.
No. I'm like, wait, what? But it's right by Rutherford and East Rutherford, where Giant Stadium is. So I would take the bus back to New York every holiday with all the New York people, you know.
The New York crew.
Yeah, we had some.
Right.
Who was on that bus? Tell me some names.
Oh, Kathy Rowe, Paul Rowe, Nadia Reynosa, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of who else. There were so many people. Lishka Cortez.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun.
Was Cookie on there? And
Cookie was on there.
the Kiramas?
Steve Reyes, yeah, the Karamas. I mean, everybody. It was so fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was the best ride. We would just like party on that bus, like going crazy.
It's funny looking back at the Milt because, you know, Hershey's so close to New York and Philadelphia. There was the big Philly crew, and then there was the big New York crew. So everybody kind of ran with their little, you know, pockets or whatever.
That's true. That is
And so, all right. I got to go back real quick before I forget. You were talking about being a freshman and coming up. And I told this story when Kate Casey came on, I think it was, that I remember you as a freshman coming up, and I don't remember who was in your crew. I want to say maybe Heather Sanderson, Erica Lawrence. I don't remember. And you were right up front.
Kathy Rowe. I was real tight with Kathy Rowe. I think that's how I met you, was with Kathy. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
When you came up to me and Warner and a bunch of us, and you were just talking, you were like, well, who's the popular dude up here? What's and you were just, I was like, who is this person?
Say that, I was like, oh no, was I really?
You were fearless. That's what I remember about you.
I'm shocked by that because now I'm like, I just remember, I was like, oh, look at all these seniors. And I remember the funny thing, I was thinking about that when you said that in the podcast, because I was like, you have no idea how much crap I got when you and I finally did become friendly, like back in the student home. Those senior girls were not having it. They were like, so freshman girl, you are not friends with our senior class. You know, if I mentioned something about like, oh yeah, like talking to you or something, oh no, they were not having it. Those girls shut it down so quick.
Which is funny because before we started, you know, this record, we were talking about how, you know, back then that 3 or 4 years was like a lifetime of difference in comparison to now. It's like, you know, somebody's 10 years older or younger than you. You're like, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's just like, yeah, feels the same. As long as you're the same, like, general decade or two.
Decade or two.
And so now, are you living in West Virginia? Is that right?
So, well, actually, so I'm supposed to be in West Virginia.
Okay.
I'm actually in Florida. My
That's a big difference.
my mom was living in Florida, and she had gotten sick. And then I know that Jackie knows, but I don't know if anybody else knows that my husband passed away. And so when I was in West Virginia, my husband and I were actually raising his youngest brother, Emery, and I was torn between like Florida and West Virginia, and my mom was like going through surgery and stuff. So I begged my job to let me come to Florida, which they did, but I had to like enroll Emery in school here and everything. So I kept like kind of pushing it out. So now it's been almost going on like close to 2 years that I've been down here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to be back in West Virginia actually as of this month. But because of the coronavirus, I got to stay. So everyone's hating on the virus and being locked in, but I'm like, it kind of worked out for me personally, because at least I get to stay here still with my mom and be Emory through graduation. So we'll see.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
We
Thanks.
saw he graduated. That's awesome.
I know, a miracle. Once we get back to normal, I think I'll end up having to go back to West Virginia, unfortunately. I mean, West Virginia is beautiful, but it's not my home.
It didn't seem like your speed. When I was reading about, so you were an attorney for years, is that right?
Yeah.
Actually, let me go back. Talk to me about college. So after you left the Milt, did you go to Rutgers? Is that right?
Yeah. Yep,
So
I
you
went to
were-
Rutgers.
Back to your Jersey roots.
Yes.
And
Only school I got into.
Well, so
Which is the
tell me-
truth. I mean, I was a little nerd, and I did National Honor Society and all that stuff, but somehow I convinced myself, I applied to Penn, Bryn Mawr, and Rutgers. And people were trying to get me to go apply to Penn State and stuff. I was like, why am I going to go to Penn State? Rutgers is the state school, right? So got rejected from Penn. I think I got waitlisted at Bryn Mawr maybe, and had nowhere else to go. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to Rutgers. I took the little bus down there, went on a visit. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. So sign me up. And I had a great time. But in retrospect, I obviously probably would have applied to more places. I might have had a shot at going to somewhere else. But it worked out for me because I had no college debt, and there were a lot of benefits. So it's one of those things you kind of land where you're supposed to be.
That's
But
right.
it wasn't really planned that way. So,
So, but that was undergrad, right? And then you went to grad school at American University down in DC?
yeah, I went to law school at American in DC.
Okay.
And I love that. And that was also the only law school I got into.
Get in where you fit.
There's a reason why you're only getting into
I know. I think it's because I was shooting, so I thought I was up here, and really I was here. So when I would try for like the Georgetowns and stuff, I'm like, no, girl, you're not that caliber. But I ended up at American, which was great. Is a law school actually started by 2 women, 4 women, and so they had a whole gender there were a lot of things I was interested in about the school. I actually did get into now that I'm thinking about it, I did get into Seton Hall too, but they weren't going to give me really much money, and I wanted to be in DC. Yeah, I wanted to go back to like a city living, and so it was going to be between New York and DC, and I ended up in DC. I was like, well, I'll try that and see what it's like, and I ended up being there for 20 years. So
Wow.
So
Yeah.
let's back up just a little bit, Fran. What's up, by the way? How you doing?
hi, what's up,
Been a
Warren?
while.
How are you?
Hey, so what you said Wayne Alling's mom introduced your mom to the school. How did you qualify to go to the school?
So my mom was a single mom, 3 kids. She had it pretty rough. I mean, she came from a family of 14 kids. They were super poor, living in like a 1-bedroom apartment in Paterson, New Jersey kind of thing. And so my parents were never really married. I mean, they were together up until I was like 5 and then split up. Both my parents were alcoholics. My mom, thankfully, when I was about 10 years old, right before going into the Milt, had gotten sober. But she was really trying to like better herself at that point. Like she was going to college and working like 2 and 3 jobs. And so the schools in New Jersey, I mean, they were fine, but I was never really challenged. So I was like one of those kids, I guess I had I had a lot of drive. I wouldn't say I was necessarily like smarter than somebody, but I really wanted like better. And I think my mom kind of saw that like it wasn't really serving a purpose for me. Like I was running out, I'd say running the streets, not like running the streets now, but I had my little bike, you know, and I was riding all over North Jersey. And she just was like, you know, I wasn't really involved in anything. I wasn't involved in like sports or any kind of like true activities other than like the girls club. So when she found out about the school, she was like, this sounds, you know, really like a good opportunity. So I went, and I was one of those kids that like, when I was at the mill, I was like, I love this. Most people, there were certain things I didn't like, but it really fed that need in me to have something to like drive towards. So I would really, it just fit the bill for me to know that, hey, I can actually get a decent education here, and I can do some things and be involved in things that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be involved in before. So, you know, that's why I ended up there. My siblings were older, so neither of them had the opportunity to go to the school. But I'm super grateful because, you know, my brother, I love him and he's awesome. And he's, you know, but he struggled, you know, he didn't go to college or do some of the things he wanted to do. And later in life, you know, he talks about that, like missing out on some opportunities. And I think if he had the opportunity to go to Milton Hershey, he would have done a lot better. My sister, likewise, she's struggled with like substance abuse and stuff like that. So, so I was really lucky to end up going there.
Oh, good. Well, so it was a blessing for you.
Oh gosh, big time. I always say I would have ended up with some like menial job just in New Jersey and not really doing much. So I really loved it. Like I was listening to one of the other podcasts, and I think somebody had asked someone about like leaving and how you felt. And I remember that day and I was like devastated. I mean, if I could have been there another 10 years, I probably would have signed up. I felt comfortable. I felt like it was home. You know, I had done well enough that I had respect of older people and, you know, had so many friends and just that security. I mean, it was so scary to me to be leaving. And I worried that like, would I make it, you know?
Right.
Did you have,
I'm sorry. Good.
What was that, Warner?
did you have somewhere to go when you graduated?
I did. I mean, luckily for me, my mom, you know, she was still in New Jersey and, you know, she had her little apartment and so I was able to go there, but it wasn't really like my space. It didn't feel home because, you know, I hadn't been there so long for like 7 years. Yeah. So the first opportunity I had to get down to Rutgers and, you know, start living there, I was like, okay, I'm ready for this, you know, and the one thing I will say about Milton Hershey, the other thing I really appreciate about it is, and I tell the kids that I interact with now is, and I've told Emery this because he's gone through some of the same things. I tried to get him into Milton Hershey and he missed it by age, just by a few days, unfortunately. But he, anytime you go through that kind of adversity or like change, it really does make you so resilient. And I just I had that ability to kind of like change and adapt and go with whatever situation was, you know, coming up. So going to Rutgers, like I just fell into it and was like, okay, I can do it. You know, it's like fake it till you make it kind of thing. And I just jumped in and did it. And same thing with being in DC. I mean, every level that you kind of go up, you're interacting with people who don't know your background. They don't have necessarily the same challenges you do. And I just was like, okay, I have to do this. Like, it's the only way to get to where I want to be. Because I used to always say, and this is the same thing I tell these other kids too, I didn't want the lights to be threatened to be turned off, you know, going and getting, and we all joke about that, like government cheese. I remember going to the food store, those little food stamps, the paper food stamps. I'd be so embarrassed. Right? I had my little $5. My mom's like, go get milk. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, you just knew it was like this, like, you know, you felt like people were looking at you and they knew that it was like, you didn't have what other people had. Right. So I always, in the back of my mind, that was always the drive for me. It's like, I just wanted, if I was middle class and A-okay, money wasn't necessarily a drive. I didn't have to be super wealthy, but I just had to be comfortable. So where there was not that lack of security with like basics.
That's kind of what I was going to with where you're at now. I feel like that's who you are. That's who you were back then. That's who you are still today. I mean, you're a judge, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am. I know, it's great.
Your Honor.
Hey, before we get into the whole judgeship and
Yeah.
your honorship and all that, the honorable. I got so before you when you transitioned into the Milt, how was from coming from the mean streets of Viking, Patterson, New Jersey, or somewhere in North Jersey?
Right.
How was your transition, and who was your first roommate? Who was your first roommate?
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask.
Sorry, I'm in there.
I thought
swimwear.
about this, and Jessica, I was thinking about your sisters too, because I was like, I don't think I roomed with Gina, but we were in Liberty together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it was Rashida. I don't know if everybody remembers Rashida, but I think she might have been my first roommate, but honestly, I don't remember. My memory is terrible.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I have some stories about Liberty. I could go on and on.
Go on and on. That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please tell. Let's see if we have the same stories.
Oh, yeah, probably, because I think we were sharing some of them on that website. But the thing about Liberty was this. So I rolled up there my mom didn't give me a lot of structure, right? So I did kind of what I wanted to do. So the whole thing of having a schedule and all that was kind of shocking. I came in with my little jean jacket, I was in the 80s in New Jersey, my hair all high, and they took all that away and brought me to the clothing room and gave me these. I was not a thin girl, so I had these ugly ass clothes that I just was I cannot believe I have to wear this. I was trying to roll up the pants and do all this kind of stuff that wasn't working. So I had a lot of struggles that way. It would kind of hit my confidence, because I was I didn't feel like myself. It was I was putting on a costume, right? So that was an issue. But I will say the girls at Liberty were very welcoming. Sheila Morrison was one of the girls. Kathy Cameo was in my student home. And it took a little, Carrie Coral was in there. It took a little while, but once I became friends with people, and then Lishka came, and Lishka and I got really tight. We had a lot of fun. And that's the one thing I remember is people always say, well, what's the thing you took away from Milt and Hershey? And the thing for me was just I just felt like I got to know people.
Jesus, I'm sorry.
Thunder.
I'm what was that? Oh, it scared me. I got to know people so well there, and so many, and I guess for me being in North Jersey, right? New Jersey kind of is its own melting pot, and I had friends of every color and faith and ethnicity and whatever, but really living with girls who were different, I became really tight with these girls. So the funny story about Liberty is that when I first went there, we had these house parents, and their names were the Swingles. And the Swingles were, in my mind, I'm sure they were younger than this, but they were late 70s, it seemed, right? She would set her hair, and it was curlers. She had the old school gray hair with curlers. The house father, he was big belly and those glasses and the pocket protector. They were just this really old couple, but they were mean and straight up racist. And it wasn't racist that explicit using language and stuff that we all know is racist, but it was just treating the black girls differently than they did the white girls. Right. And I describe this all the time, because the black girls would be going to do their hair, and they'd be like, that stinks, what are you doing? And they were using a straightening comb with the grease, and they would just give them a hard time all the time. And one of the craziest stories, and how we ended up with different house parents, was that there was this one girl, her name was Betty. I can't remember her last name, but she had come to the school, and like a lot of us, didn't have the best, guidance at home. So her cleanliness wasn't really up to, she didn't realize, right?
Her personal hygiene.
Yeah, her personal hygiene, exactly. Yeah. Wasn't really up to what they expected. And so, and especially I think she had gotten her period maybe recently and didn't really know how to manage all that. Right. Well, anyway, I mean, this is a gross story, but this is the truth of it. They found these dirty undergarments, and they sat all the girls around the student table, and they put them on a plate and made us pass them around the dining room table and was like,
What?
how some of you girls are living. And she was like looking at the older girls like, you need to take care of this and like all this stuff. So sure enough, you know what happened on the walk to school? Poor old Betty got jumped and like
Yeah,
pushed
she
in the
got beat up.
bushes
Yeah.
and this whole thing. Anyway, it got to Home Life, and once all this stuff came out, because I remember being like talked to by Home Life, and they were asking us questions, and I told them a lot of stuff that was going on, because the house father would go upstairs when the girls are still getting ready for school, and they'd be like in their bras, and he didn't care. He was just like, you need to get downstairs, and he just had no respect for boundaries. So they just were not the appropriate people to be in that student home. So then we ended up with the Millers, which ended up being this strong contrast because they were so sweet, very religious. I remember Miss Miller, like the first night she came in, she tried to tuck us into the bed. I mean, like literally putting like giving you like wanted you to like say your prayers and all this stuff. So it was such a contrast, but we had some crazy experiences at that student home. I mean, the Swingles would like, they'd make us scrape wax with like those little straight razors for like punishment. And it was just crazy. But that kind of stuff was crazy. But at the same time, I look back and I laugh, and I also bonded with those girls over all that. We would go down the basement. One of the funny things, Jackie talking about like dancing, when I first got to the school, I'm certain I had like no rhythm, no beat, no nothing. But later on, I became known as this like white girl that could dance. And it was only because Kathy and Sheila literally were like, girl, no. Like, just no. They would play this music and I mean, I got hooked on all kinds of music that I wasn't like listening to before. And they taught me how to dance. I mean, like literally we're like, you got this, like, come on, and I think Rashana Johnson was in our student too. And they taught me how to dance, like just made me do it until I got it right. Like, you're going to get this.
Video of that.
Yeah. And I thank them, because I will say I met my husband on a dance floor, and I was home, and he was probably like, oh, look, this little white girl got figured out.
You got a few moves.
I know.
I like the girl. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, that was always how I looked at it. Just that bonding experience was amazing, and it stayed with me the whole way through high school. I feel like I had friends from every group and religion and everything. I mean, that was what I loved about it. So,
well,
I'm sorry, I got to jump in real quick. So this is a new stage of the show that nobody's approved. I'm just throwing it in there right now. It's called Random Shoutouts. So I got two random names that came to my head. Everybody gets an opportunity to throw out a random shout out. So my two random shout outs, because it came across my head, Lydia Verotny, have no idea where she is, haven't seen her since we graduated, and Liza Lucas. Random shout out.
Lucas.
Random shout out. So next, whoever's next, let's go.
Oh,
Granny, you go.
go ahead.
Who's my random shout outs? Okay.
Random.
I will give a shout out to Matt Hancock, who was my year, goofy kid, and just we're still good friends, and I don't get to talk to him very often, but I love him to death. And Paul Davis, who's also one of my favorite, Colonel Davis now, in the Army. He's actually stationed abroad right now, and love him, and I want him to be safe. So.
Shout out to the Colonel.
Yes.
Right.
I give my shout out to two of my roommates. One was Nicole Pronti. She was one of my roommates at Student Home Liberty. And then Tamika Brooks was one of my
Tamika Brooks.
I didn't know y'all were roommates.
Yeah. Yes, we oh my God, here it comes again.
Warner, you got it. You up?
I do. I got since we were talking about people that taught you how to dance, Joe College. He was only he was in Weiser for maybe 2 years, 3 tops. And he taught me how to, he's a white boy, and he taught me how to moonwalk. Nobody did it better than him. No lie. If I saw him today, I'd ask him to do it. Okay. And the other shout out, of course, is for your mom.
Is who?
Your mom.
Oh, your mom? Okay.
No, he's always with the mom.
Always.
Let me see, man. That's a tough one. I think the first one is easy for me, and that's
it's random. It's random.
My man MC, Mike Constantinescu.
R.I.P.
He passed, and but you know, you're lucky when you get to see a Milt or hang out with them after the Milt. You know, being at the Milt is one thing, but afterwards, so like, I don't know how many years after the Milt, I got to hang out with him out in Tahoe, and it was like we were kids again. So for those 2-3 days, so I miss him. And then man, I gotta say my girl Laura Hannity. Laura's a good one because she's always on the low. She's not on any of the social media stuff or anything like that, but she's always trying to keep up what's going on at the Milt. So shout to Laura Hannity.
What's up, Laura? What up?
You know what I mean?
Hey.
That's, I like that episode. All right, Goey just out here doing it. I like.
Yeah, just random. We just random with it.
And he didn't even prove it. We see
Yeah,
it wasn't home life approved or anything. There was no.
Yeah, nobody allowed that. I just
sorry.
Little salt and pepper, you know.
So, Fran, let me ask you. So you said you are raising your husband's youngest son?
Youngest brother.
Youngest brother. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So what made what made you do that or want to do that?
Well, he a situation where his mom was in California and she had remarried and he wasn't getting along really with his stepfather. And they had some younger children and he was really like struggling. And then she was moving to Arizona and it was like one of those situations where, you know, she kind of didn't force him to come with her. I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but
get your PC.
He was left in California and trying to kind of make it, you know, staying with friends and things like that. And it came to a head when he ended up not being able to stay with the person who he was spending the most time with. And we got a call from CPS because he obviously, you know, said, well, I have this brother, you know, my older brother. And had given, you know, his name and phone number. Because at that point we had developed a relationship with him. And we had talked about him even maybe coming to live with us when we were in Virginia, right outside of DC. But we knew that we were likely going to be moving. So we're like, you know, the timing's not right. Like, let's see how this works out. We thought he would end up going to Arizona eventually anyway. But that didn't happen. So we got the call from CPS and they were like, look, if he doesn't end up with a family member, like he'll end up, you know, going to a foster home at least for the interim. And so my husband called me at work. I was like, just put him on a plane, you know, and my husband always said after that, he's like, I can't believe like you didn't even hesitate. And I was like, how did you not know that about me? I mean, that to me is like the biggest Milton Hershey thing, right? Like I would never leave a kid without a place to go, you know, with family, even if I'm across the country, which we were. And I was like, just send him, you know? So he came and it was a real struggle. He wanted structure, but he still wanted to like flex and show that, you know, he wasn't going to totally be listening to us. But, you know, we were working with him and he was doing pretty well. But then the whole thing happened where my husband died and that was 9 months later. So here I am, like I'm a recent widow, had moved from Virginia to West Virginia. And now I've got this, you know, 15-year-old kid. And my husband passed away a day before him, returned 16. That's where I was mentioning the Milton Hershey thing. So like after that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like, cause we had talked about Milton Hershey before and I actually had applied for him and he got rejected and they never told me why. I had applied for him when he was in California. And I think it was because he might've been having some discipline things, but I didn't see what the school actually sent to Milton Hershey and they don't tell you. That's what's kind of crazy to me. Like they never said, oh, well, his grades aren't good enough or whatever. They just rejected it and said, you have a year later to apply. And so my husband passed away and I tried like an emergency kind of thing. Like I started reaching out to people at the Milt and that cutoff of 16 is firm. And that turns out it's because it's in the deed of trust that they have like no flexibility with it whatsoever. So I ended up even getting in touch with Pete Gert, like somebody put me in touch with him and I was like begging because at that point I was like so overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like emotionally, I don't know if I can do it, you know, and Mike Weller was trying to, you know, help me out. It worked out in the end, but it was a real rough time. And at times I did question like my sanity when I took it on, but it wasn't because of anything Emory was doing. It's just because the way the situation worked out. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like now I'm a single parent, like never raised a child before, you know, was already flailing, trying to like figure it out. And then to have like the carpet pulled out from under you kind of thing, you know. But he has done really well. I give him a lot of credit. He's really matured. He's working a job. He's trying to figure out kind of next moves, like after graduation. I'm trying to get him to consider the military. If not, then he's just going to do community college. But he's like us. I mean, he's resilient, and he also wants better. You know, he doesn't want to be, you know, struggling, and you know, he wants success. So I think he's going to do well. And he has a great personality. His personality is like my husband's, like super outgoing. Everybody like loves him, and he's smart. He doesn't have a lot of common sense. I joke with him about like he doesn't have street sense.
Right.
But he's smart, so he'll figure that out. That's going to come, you know, with time. But yeah, he's a really good kid, and I'm lucky to
help
have
you with your, well, I know you were resilient anyway, but did the Milt structure kind of help you when you did take Emory on?
Oh my gosh, so much. Warner, I don't know if you and I are Facebook friends. If we're not, we need to talk about that. But I actually have posted a few times on there. I have put him on 30 and 30, no joke. Because I was trying everything and it wasn't working. And I was like, I got to go back to the only thing I know is the Milt and Hershey way. So I gave him a list of 30 chores, like well, actually it wasn't 30 chores. It was chores that here's what you have to work until you get the 30 hours worked. And then 30 days of like no video games, no nothing, like not doing anything socially. And he did it, and he worked out his list. And I actually took a picture of it when he had worked out all the hours, because he was like, this poor kid was counting like 15-minute increments. Like, I picked up dog poo, you know, 15 minutes. But I mean, he cleaned the windows inside and out. I went back to the old, like, you know, I was like, okay, windows need to be done. Springtime, like, get working on the windows. And he did it, and he didn't complain. And that's the thing with kids, like, and I think that that's what we took from Milt and Hershey, like, as much as we wanted to fight it, kids do love structure. And once they have that and they kind of know what the limits are, and believe me, I mean, we had some I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not proud of it, but like we even had a physical altercation. He was like, the one thing that I had that I was really against was marijuana. And it's not because I'm so prudish, but it really was because of my job. My job is very like,
absolutely.
Government, you know, you can't. So I was like really driving that home to him. And then every once in a while, it just would come up like every 2 weeks. And I kept saying to him, I'm like, you know, can you just not go to the beach and be with your friends? And like, if you're going to smoke a joint and have a beer, like, I don't know about it. But he was like stupid. Like this, I'd find stuff in the house, or he would do it like on the patio. I'd be smelling it. So we had these like knockdown, drag out like arguments. And I was like, you're going to lose everything. Like if I lose my job. And one time it became physical, which, like I said, I'm not proud of, but I kind of had to do that because I look back on it and I'm like, I had to show him that I am the authority.
You ain't gonna take that shit. That's what
I'm not gonna take it. And right. And he was really shocked because
you ain't gonna bring no weed in there.
Thought that he was gonna like, and kind of, to be honest, I mean, he was the one who kind of like initiated some of it, but like he really thought that he was gonna do that to me. And I grew up with an older brother. It's like, you hit me, and I've had this experience too, even as an adult. I'm like, if you come in my face, I'm as professional as I can be, but I can get back to my Jersey roots really quick.
That line cross,
I get pushed to that limit, right? So, so he was really shocked because I mean, I hauled off on him, and he was, you know, I was like, don't put your hands on me, kind of thing. And so we went through a lot of struggles, a lot of stuff like that, but certainly having gone to Milt and Hershey and experience all those things. And I talk about Milt and Hershey with that too, because I will tell you, any little attempts at bullying when I first came to Milt and Hershey got squashed really quick because I was like that. I was not afraid. I was like, if you want to fight with me, we're going to fight.
I know right there.
That's just going to be the way it is. Like, I used to fight my brother who was 7 years older, so I'm sure you can't hurt me more than he did. So
I'm glad you brought your brother. You brought your brother up, Franny. How was your relationship I guess because you mentioned that your siblings didn't go to the Milt, and I'm sure that you said 7 years. How was your relationship like kind of growing up, especially after the Milt and with the Milt, with not kind of being around them so much? How was your relationship with them?
It was always really good. My sister and I have had a different experience. So my sister, when I was growing up, she was 18 years older than me, right? So
Wow.
I really looked up to her and kind of used her. Like some summers I would go to her house actually instead of going to my mom's. But as I got older, I started seeing some things with like the way she was living and kind of struggling. Like she had a lot of issues with men in terms of like put her importance or like success on her relationship with men, like tied her success to men, which I didn't realize when I was younger. But as I got older and became more aware of that, you know, it kind of changed our relationship because I wasn't looking up to her like a parent. Like then it started to become more like a sister thing. And then I was like, hey, you know, this isn't right. Like what's going on? And I tried to like counsel her through some of this stuff. And we ended up, I mean, we really don't have much of a relationship now at all, which is really sad to me. But if you know a lot of people who have substance abuse, until the person kind of recognizes that that's what's causing a lot of problems they have, you can't really help people. I mean, it's been a 20-something year cycle and it's the same repetitive, you know, dysfunctional behavior kind of stuff. So for me, you know, that ended up like being a real crack in our relationship. But with my brother has always been my biggest cheerleader. And honestly, like no matter how tough things have been for him, like over the years, like I said, like not finishing his education because he was working and all that stuff. He's just been awesome. I mean, he always, he's so proud and like, you know, always supportive, anything he could do to help. He drove me down to college, you know, my first day of college. It actually ended up being like a random snowstorm and we got like in a little car accident. And we always laugh about stuff like that because he was driving this little hoopty, you know, car that we had. And he was moving me into my dorm room, you know, the way parents, every other college kid parents were, but I didn't have that. It's always been a big rock for me. And I mean, we talk like at least every other day now, if not by text and by phone. So we've maintained a really tight relationship, which I'm happy for.
How did he handle when you went to the school and he wasn't able to go?
Well,
like, was that hard for him, or did he resent that fact?
No, he had already left the house.
Okay.
I was 13, so he was 20 at that time.
Okay.
He had been out of the house by then, and he was, you know, doing his own thing and kind of trying to make it work, you know, with his girlfriend, like his job. So he missed me, but at the same time, he knew it's like one of those things, like when you just know, like this is going to be really good for this person. So, you know, we would talk intermittently. He wasn't a big like letter writer. We didn't have email then. So my main times of connecting with them were like over the holidays. But he was always the same, you know, he'd come in and like give me my little noogies on my head and, you know, put me in a headlock and beat me up. But you know, take me out for pizza and just want to catch up. I mean, he was just a good big brother. So he's always been awesome. And any of my friends who have met him are like, he's like a big teddy bear. He's a big guy and like, you know, and would knock your head off in a second if you ticked him off, but he's so forgiving and would like give you the shirt off his back, you know?
Yeah. So I have a couple little quick, fast questions for you.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna go house chores or barn chores. Which did you prefer?
House chores. I never did barn chores.
Oh, that's right.
I was just at Mazeland and I got out of it. House chores. I'm still OCD crazy about cleaning to this day.
Be done a certain way.
It's right.
What was your favorite candy bar?
I love Reese's peanut butter cups, but I will say Take 5 too.
Okay.
Take 5.
Take 5. Wow.
Did you ever hook out when you were at the Milt?
I did not. I was a goody.
Did anybody come hook in?
Yes. People hooked in, and that was my story with the with Mazeland. I had a boyfriend at the time. A bunch of guys hooked in. The house parents found out this had been going on for like a year. I let some kids.
Wait, they were hooking in for a year?
Oh yeah, the Clearview boys were hooking out to Mazeland like almost every other night. We were partying with like Jeremy Drain, Paul Soto, those guys were out. They were bringing alcohol. We were hanging out in the basement. I mean, it was crazy.
No, y'all were wilding out. After we left, y'all were wilding out.
They sure were.
It was,
Liquor.
I remember like
Brought
opening up the
liquor.
bathroom door and I'd be like, oh, hey, here they are. We were like, I remember Duke won a champion. I was a huge Duke basketball fan, and Duke had won the championship that year. And like, I was like, this is great. I get to party like in the basement.
Wait. You just said you were a goody-goody. What happened?
Well, no, okay. I was a goody-goody in terms of I was smart enough to know not to get caught. I was like, if I leave the student home, I'm gonna get caught.
I think it's funny that when you asked the question, Jess, she was like, "Oh no, I never hooked out."
Yeah.
Oh,
no. I was a goody-goody.
I would never hook out.
That's
However,
that attorney talk.
however,
Never.
I'm gonna.
however,
We were
they
having
did hook
pictures
in.
in the rec
Right.
room.
That's right. But my boyfriend used to ask about coming over, and I was like, no. I knew if I was like, there were certain limits. I don't guess I played the line. It was a little gray. But what happened was I let this guy sleep on my floor. He wasn't even
What
coming
had
to
happened,
anybody.
yeah.
He was just there for the trip, which is dumb. I mean, why would you do that? Anyway, we got busted, and the house parents like busted up the whole student. I mean, this is Sadie Miller, Kathy Mueller, Kathy Rowe, me, Kate Casey, all the girls. They just were like, oh, you guys are too tight, because nobody was telling on each other. We all knew what was going on. Nobody was saying anything. And they busted up the whole student home, and they transferred all of us out.
That's like in Trailway. One night, I think Krista Hawker was getting ready to be transferred out of the student home. So they were going to have a little going away party that night. So they thought it would be fun to go hook out. 7 girls. It was like Sabrina, Krista, Jen Daly,
Sabrina was in it.
Oh my
Meredith Ward. Like it was like 7 girls. They all got caught hooking out.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
like, idiots.
No.
Let's just say we didn't have to do a lot of chores in our student home because it was like 7 girls on 30 and 30.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah.
So-
that's probably-
No Sunday dishes for a while.
You're just eating cookies in the front of the kitchen.
I know.
Y'all gonna clean all this shit up?
I will tell one other funny story about that, because in my mind, one of the funniest memories I have is Zakita Killingsworth would get on the phone at night in the kitchen literally every night, because the house parents, I don't know what, they slept like rocks. We would all be in the pantry eating either cereal or like the whole thing of cookies.
Yeah.
And Zakita would just be calling New Jersey, like her boyfriend or whatever, all night. I mean, it was so, when I think of this, I'm like, it was so funny now, but she was rocking.
She was calling.
Literally just in the kitchen. You remember that phone right there on the wall?
Yeah.
She's on the helper sink, just like chatting on the phone.
Making calls.
Yeah, just like, hey, this is my phone. And nobody questioned anything, because the phone was always calling every other, state anyway. So.
There was only one phone back then too. It wasn't
I
like
know.
everybody had, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody was checking the bills.
Yeah. No, they weren't.
I wanted to go back. We had started to allude to this subject before, Fran, and I wanted to ask you, Pete's hopefully going to come on down the road, and we're going to talk to him about the racial tension and all the stuff going on at the Milt. But I wanted to talk to you, one, because you're still involved with the Alumni Association, and 2, because on social media, which is where a lot of us see what's going on, I see you on there, and you're always the voice of reason. So first, I wanted to give you kudos for that, and 2, I wanted to get your take on where things are and, moving forward, what you think is best, or, just your take on it in general. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think where things are is like really good. Just in terms of, we have a national collective right now, recognizing a problem that before there was a lot of denial over. And that denial, as I've told a lot of people and talking to them about Milt and Hershey, is, that Milt and Hershey was great, but it wasn't perfect. It was not a utopia, as I
Like most things in life.
Right. It's a microcosm of the world, and exactly what goes on in the world was going on there. And like the story I told before, the Swingles, I mean, that is a more extreme example, but I grew up with plenty of girls who have told similar stories of things that I don't think we talk about the word racist, right? And that puts everybody on the defensive, and nobody likes to hear that, but these implicit things that are not culturally sensitive and accepting of others' cultures and practices like that. And that's what I think a lot of people experience. A lot of it, I think, sometimes is on the home life side. And, you know, I'm trying to learn more about kind of what the experience is like now, because I think it's different, obviously, from when we were there. But I think the conversation is good. And I think what I'm seeing as well is young people are not as quiet as we were, right? Like people, and you'll hear people talk about this too, like at Milton Hershey, everybody knew, like, just don't bring it up. Because if you bring it up, like, you're the agitator, you're creating trouble, right? Because like you're throwing something out there. To throw out that race card was always deemed as like just being, you know, trying to create a problem. And that's unfortunate, but that's kind of what we learned. Like it was just, and I think it's kind of like I said before too, like Virgil Whitsitt and I have talked about this. He was a past president of the Alumni Association. There was a lot of just like hair, you know, black hair. I mean, even as a man, he was saying that he learned very quickly, like, you know, you got to keep your hair short and like keep it professional. And like, in some ways that's good guidance, but then also what is it telling someone that like there's something bad about, like if you have dreads or something like that. And that's the kind of stuff that the conversation's changing. And it's not like you just have to go along to get along. It's like, well, no, there's nothing wrong with this expression of like my identity or my culture. And that's where that conversation is long overdue. And that's the type of conversation I think needs to be happening at Milton Hershey. And to some degree, I think some of it has happened. And I will say this, Pete, even though he's an older, you know, homeboy and like white guy, I have never seen someone engage with the kids as well as he has, you know, and I can't speak for the students now, but just being on the outside and seeing it, I'm like, if anybody can bridge that and kind of understand what's going on for a lot of these kids, I think he's in a good position to do it. I still, though, think that we do need, and the school has now committed to this with their recent statement, I think we need more people of color in positions of leadership at the school. I think in particular in the home life role, that would be really key. So I was really happy to see that commitment from the school. And now it's about, you know, kind of taking those steps to get it there. But on the same side, in the alumni side, we've had those same conversations. It's a little bit different because we're a volunteer organization, right? So people don't know that we had a past president that was Black. They don't know that, you know, we do have a Black female on the board. I would like the representation to be more than it is. We're getting there. But like I said, it's a volunteer organization. And what happens is it's really like who has the time and the commitment. A lot of people don't get involved until they're older, usually when, you know, maybe their kids are grown and they can kind of like give back. But what we're starting to see now is we are reaching out more to the younger generations, and we're telling them, we're finding ways for them to get involved, not in a huge role, but maybe just like, hey, you want to be on this committee and like work on this? So we're starting to bring in younger people. And I think with that, naturally, it brings in young blood. It brings in those, you know, different groups, because Milton Hershey has the representation, right? Like we have the alumni. I mean, our graduates are all across the board. I mean, we've got Asians and Indians and Native Americans and women, people of color. I mean, we run the whole spectrum. Black, Hispanic, Latina, you know, we have it there. We just got to pull from it and say, hey, we really need your voice in this group. So people feel represented and then want to be engaged with the Alumni Association, because we do a lot of great stuff, but people just don't know a lot of what we're doing. And we're just now getting to the point where we're more visible. And I think we're bringing us into the, you know, into the century and kind of doing things that that a lot of people, you know, will connect with.
That a lot of, I mean, so much of what you just said is poignant. Like something that I've noticed, we're talking to people and we're hearing these stories, there was a lot of unqualified staff there back in the day, you know, and on top of the fact that these people were unqualified, it was old school. So, you know, we were probably 20, 25 years behind what regular society was, just because, you know, it's its own little world up there in the Milt. So again, the thing that you're talking about is having a dialogue, about there is an issue, we can be better. That's that's the first thing. Having the alumni association there is fantastic, and reach. I think a lot of people are disenchanted after they leave the Milt. I mean, another thing that I hear is a lot of people don't go back or even think about the Milt for 10 years after, it's just too easy trying to get on your feet and become a human. So you're not really thinking about the Milt. So I think the fact that you guys are reaching out to people, I could name 3, 4, 5 people from my area, the Philippas, the Dishas, the Scott Richardsons, the people with the credibility that I think could help and could do something. And I think it's good that Pete is who he is, because he's a homeboy. And like you said, he is a white man who's a little bit older, but I think he acknowledges that.
Hey, he's not that old, man. Give God free.
To the kids, he's old.
Oh,
Wait,
a gully
man,
and
what a guy.
yeah.
I went to school. I mean, I'm in the same era with Peter, so give him a break, man.
We ain't that much younger, so
That's what I'm saying. Give him a break, brother.
But he's got a unique opportunity here.
Well,
He really does.
If you've talked to him,
and we will,
and we will, but I'm saying I have had some conversations with him, and he has a genuine concern. Now his viewpoints, his opinions, he will be able to put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I feel like when it's being thought about, and not because of issues, but because there's a genuine concern that he has, and I feel like that. I think that we're going to hopefully be able to see some of that what comes out of it.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't know exactly what will be done, but I think there will be some strong things, and I think a lot of it has to do with just a major concern about what's going on. So.
And I think like one of the things that that I've tried to talk to other people, even other board members, when we're having conversations, is it's talking the same way that the nation's talking, right? Like if you say Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean you're saying like all lives don't matter. So if people say, well, there's some racist policies or procedures or things at Milton Hershey, it doesn't mean necessarily that anything is intended to be that way. It can just be sometimes the application of those things, right? So if you've got a certain policy, I mean, I keep going back to the hair example, but actually online, if you see a lot of kids that are talking about some experiences, that oftentimes ends up becoming like a thing that they're really sensitive about. If you've got like a rule and then the application of that rule as it is applied to a Black African-American boy or girl, and the application of it now becomes like you've broken this rule because like your hair doesn't fit the way that we intended or what we look like, that kind of stuff is where it ends up, you're discriminating and treating those kids different. And that's the kind of thing where it's like sensitivity, using discretion, like understanding of those things. It goes way beyond hair. I mean, I know that, but I use that example because Virgil and I've talked about that. It's like you can go on a lot of these stories and see that they are little, you're not seeing the explicit, like people have this experience, but you're not seeing a lot of like just racial language and people being talked to in a way, derogatory way. Well, usually what you end up seeing is like these things where it's people not understanding like the religion of people or background, if somebody's Muslim, the house parents are bringing people in for Christian prayer. Well, I mean, it's not to say you can't pray, but it's a non-denominational school. So like make the students feel like they don't have to participate. Everything's voluntary, right?
And be brave enough to visit that rule. So, you put a rule or a policy in place to kind of, for a good reason, but that doesn't mean that won't become archaic or, outdated soon. So you have to be brave enough to revisit that and say, you know what, we got to update that. And if you don't, then you're going to keep having the same problems. And so again, that goes back to that word, the dialogue and being able to look at it like the school's over 100 years old. So something that was everything that was implemented 100 years ago won't apply now.
Right.
It's just not realistic.
Shouldn't apply now.
Shouldn't. And so
That's
we got to
right.
know that we got to be able to look at that stuff and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and we'll get there. I think that we will get there. I think our problems are hopefully, I mean, again, I don't know everything that's going on there. I hope that there's not these bigger, I think a lot of it is just, it's more the sensitivity, the training, like implicit bias training, you know, things like that, having people who kids can go to. I mean, we talk about Webb, right? Everybody loved Webb. I mean, he was that go-to guy for so many kids of color and white kids too, but for people of color to have that person, I mean, having those people in those roles where kids feel comfortable being able to go and say, hey, I'm having this issue, and knowing that's a safe space. And, you know, they've talked about that, having a position in the school where kids do feel like they can raise some of these issues. And I think that that's going to be really huge, because I think a lot of times too, people want to be heard. That's,
absolutely.
you know, and I've learned that in my current job. That's the biggest thing I tell people. They're like, what's the thing like about your job? And I'm like, it's just listening to people. A lot of times, even if you're not going to find favorably for people, they just want to be heard. You know,
sometimes people want to be heard by a certain person that they're comfortable with. And I think that they have to have that audience. Now, it doesn't, you know, fortunately enough, we had a Webb or whoever it was. It doesn't necessarily have to be Webb, but you have to have someone that you can find, someone that you feel like you can go to. And I feel like for a long time, maybe Webb or Mr. Galloway or whoever it may have been one of very few people that you can feel comfortable that you had the confidentiality to and candor to speak with, you know, in certain
relatability.
Yeah.
Right.
I can understand like what you're saying. Like, I can't understand what it's like to be an African American female. I don't have that experience, you know, but somebody else who's lived that knows. They know these little subtle things like that. You're not imagining it. You don't have a chip on your shoulder. These things are real. You know, I used to have these conversations with my husband all the time about the way he was treated if he was in a suit versus if, you know, he was leaving the gym and had a hoodie on. And those things are real. I mean, that's an experience.
Well, that's a very real thing, trust me.
Yes, and he experienced it so frequently. And, you know, that's the thing too, is like, we shouldn't have to like implore people and beg people to like believe these things. It's like, you're my brother, you know, Jackie's my brother. When people tell me these things happen, when my husband told me they happen, you don't have to prove to me that it happened. I believe you because I love you. And why would someone make up these things? These are your life experiences.
I think that people, the problem is globally, well, at least here in our country, is that there are so many people so far removed from other people that they can't even fathom, they can't contemplate. It's not in their being, it's not in their life, they don't have homeboys, they don't have brothers and sisters who everybody didn't go to the Milt. And if you, even in college, there's a lot of people that went to college with African Americans, but their relationships are nowhere near what relationships are in Milton Hershey. If you'll notice, everybody kind of stays together, and so it's not the same. Yeah, you might have had a black friend in college, but it was, I don't know how intimate it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but what about the people? I mean, we see it online, right? This is the shocking thing. Like, there are people who had the same experience that we all had in Milton Hershey, and they're in this state of denial.
Yeah.
I mean,
because they got so far away, in my opinion, they got into their life. And so some of the stuff they can't associate with any longer.
Yeah. Or
Warner,
they
you're
have
on
like
mute.
blinders on.
Warner, you're on mute.
Warner, you're on mute.
My bad. There's a bunch of people that they start off like they're racist or removed, should I say. I won't say racist. Removed.
You can say whatever you want.
But then they get to the Milt and they get engrossed in, should I say, diversity. And they leave the Milt and go back to being removed, and then kind of forget that, hey, like, just because you're removed doesn't mean the rest of the world is. Like, that world is still very real for a lot of people, but they don't believe that because they have been removed for so long. So I get what you're saying, like all the Facebook posts, and I can't understand how people can forget 8 to 10 years of their life either. You know, interacting with people of color, and now they can't actually fathom, like you said, that we have different
Or
experiences.
vice versa.
Because
It's what'd you say?
I said, or vice versa. Like, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of Black folks that went to the Milt that are frustrated, that are lashing out at white Milts that might not necessarily. See, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because there's so many different parts. But my point is,
There are a lot. Yeah.
you have to have dialogue and you have to be honest about all that stuff.
There's so many layers to it, Jack.
There is.
Yeah, but you
At the end of the day, we're all the same. We're people. We're all. I don't understand it. Like, I really, really don't understand it because I didn't grow up that way, and we're all people. Like, I don't understand. You wouldn't want to be treated a certain way. So why do you treat someone else a certain way? It just annoys me.
It's
I feel like
frustrating.
you have
You know,
to be.
at the same
You have to
time-
be open. I'm sorry. You have to be open-minded.
Yeah.
Open-minded. And when I say open-minded, a lot of people, they say they want to hear certain things, but
But they don't.
But they're closed-minded. And so, you know, you can't get anything in your hand with it like this.
Yeah.
So you have to open so that you can receive. And if it never opens, then you'll never be able to see anything, and you'll be as closed as you started. So that's a goal I'm being with.
And I think too, what I'm gonna say is that I think that even the most open-minded person, and I always considered myself, you know, welcoming and open and all of that, but I even over time have learned certain things that I, you know, as a woman, I didn't realize I was giving off some vibe of something, right? Like, as a woman, if I go in an elevator, if you're a Black, white, Hispanic, whatever man, and you come in the elevator, I'm automatically like, my guard's up, right? But that is a totally different message being sent maybe to a white male versus like a Black male. And I didn't realize that. And my husband would talk about that, like people clutching purses or locking doors and doing things like that. And these are the kind of things that, like, sometimes maybe don't have a certain meaning, but they are giving off a message. I mean, and I've learned myself, like, hey, you know, well, wait, was I doing that? I mean, did I act differently if someone was Black versus white? I mean, I don't know. You know, you've got to look within yourself and know, hey, no matter how woke you think you are, how whatever you are, there are certain things even that anybody can do that are treating people differently, and you can always improve, always make yourself a better person.
So look, I don't, you know, again, we could talk about this all night. And Fran, I was happy to have you on because, like I said, I've noticed you were one of the most vocal, understanding people on there, in my opinion, you know, and I'm glad to know that you're on the alumni, so you know, with the squad, the alumni association, and hopefully we can come at it as better and stronger.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And so look, we're running over the time. I wanted to give you a chance to say anything to anybody, you know, talk to them about how the Milt affected you, if you wanted to speak to the kids that are there now.
Yeah, I mean, I would just tell the kids, like, these kids are awesome. They're, like we said, they're being vocal and speaking out, and, you know, we can take lessons from them and just how active they're being. I think about being their age and just not being nearly as vocal. And sometimes, you know, they're still learning their voice. And I think that's one of the things I try to tell people is they may not use the most professional language or, you know how to come about things in a diplomatic way, but the message is still there. So take away the stuff that you might find to be inflammatory or, you know, troubling, and get to the heart of the message and what's there. So, you know, I would just say to them, like, keep doing what they're doing and believe in yourself. I always said things, like I said before, about faking it until you make it. I still, I'll say this about my current job, right? Because everybody always is like, how'd you become a judge and like this job? And it's like, hey, I don't know. I didn't know anything about Social Security law, right? But you apply, you go through this process, and you just have to believe that you can do it. And I've always had this feeling, I think this happens with poor kids. That's the way I always describe myself.
On the shoulder.
Is I always had this like less than kind of thing, but I never showed it, right? Like I never felt smart enough, never felt, John Mueller and his thing was talking about going to Penn, right? And it wasn't necessarily the same exact experience at Rutgers because the caliber of kids isn't the same as Penn, but there were still times where I was like, these kids are smarter than me. Am I going to make it? Same thing in law school. I was in law school. Everybody had laptops. I was the poor kid still with my little notebooks, you know, trying to, I'd go to the computer lab. I didn't have a laptop. I was trying to make my rent and couldn't pay my rent. I mean, I always had this thing of like the little train that could and trying to get there. And when I did a stint at the U.S. Attorney's Office when I went to Department of Labor. Is like I just never felt smart enough, but I always still tried. And what I found was I actually was smart enough. I just didn't believe, you know, I was good enough because I wasn't comparing myself to other people. I was just looking at myself saying like, oh, you don't have that education. You don't have that caliber of background. You know, you didn't have all these things. And so to these kids, you know, I would just say like, you can do whatever you want to do. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I became a lawyer. Then was like, oh, it'd be really cool to be a judge. And I got to be a judge and I put on that robe and, you know, I feel proud of it because I know what I did to get there.
We're proud of you.
Good.
Yeah. So that's my takeaway to kids is just if you have enough drive and perseverance, you can get through anything, you know.
Thank you so much for coming on, friend.
Can we get the prompt? Warner.
I call you out.
Warner.
This was your job.
Warner, you got it. Thank you.
This was your job, and now you keep calling it off on me. But I will do it.
You look so comfortable just now.
Fran, can you say this is Fran? I don't know if you still have the same last name. I'm not sure what your last name is.
Serafin.
Oh, it still is. Okay, I wasn't sure. Can you say this is Francine Serafin on MiltTalkPodcast.com?
This is Francine Serafin on MiltTalkPodcast.com.
Yeah.
You got it right.
First thing.
Head swinging over there, that's what I remember.
Yeah.
I remember.
He gave the swag and everything. Yeah. Milk Talk, yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jackie. Before we hang up, I do have to ask, Jessica, how are your sisters?
They're heathens. I'm just kidding.
She meant that.
I see little snippets on
Right.
Facebook.
They're good.
I haven't seen them in
They're
so
good.
long. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I love you guys. I got to jump off.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on, Francine. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was so nice to meet you.
My pleasure. All right.
Fran, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.